Hello and welcome to Unprofessional Engineering. My name is James.
You got Luke?
Luke, we're talking about the evolution of video game consoles this
I
episode.
cannot believe it took us 130 or 40 or whatever we're at to start talking about video games.
I geeked out pretty hard on this one. I really enjoyed the research, and I considered myself a fairly knowledgeable person in this subject and learned all sorts of stuff that I didn't know.
So I'm basically the exact opposite of that. I haven't played a video game since roughly 2001.
Really?
Like, period. So it's been like 19 years.
Is that about when you
18
became
years.
a father? No, a little sooner when you got married?
No, it was around marriage time, but
Yeah,
that wasn't
that'll happen.
that wasn't the reason why. I totally lost and I'll talk about it later because one of my favorite games was launched in 2000. And that's the last video game where I had a controller. Now, granted, a couple of my nephews, whenever I visited their houses,
that
hey,
doesn't
Uncle
count.
Luke, and I don't even know how
Yeah.
to press the buttons, you know. So, but that's the last time I really played a video game was 2001.
All right, well, let's dive into the history, huh?
So, what is a video game console, James?
I don't even know. Please
So
tell me.
a video game console is a computer device that outputs a video signal or visual images to display a video game that one or more player can play.
So when I was doing my research, I decided personally that a PC does not count as a video game
I'm
console.
totally with you too.
I don't think it does. I know there's a lot of gaming that goes on there and whatnot, but I don't count it. I'm talking like actual plug into my TV.
Okay, so
kinda console.
I'm going to drop a fun fact. I was going to save it for later, but it seems
right.
like a perfect time to do. So there is I think it's on CNET or one of these other, it was a breakdown state by state which consoles are more preferred in the United States. So it was basically a breakdown between Xbox, PlayStation, Switch, and then there was PC thrown in there. And interestingly, PC is West Virginia. PC is, what did we say that state was?
Montana.
I think Montana, and then Rhode Island. So what's up with these states? These people can't afford consoles?
I guess so.
Like, I get Montana. You know, there's more cows than people. You get like 20 people that are using a PC and they totally outweigh the ranchers,
yeah,
right?
that's
You know,
fair.
but like West Virginia, come on. I mean, you're close to society. I know you're in the hills.
And they
you
have WVU
Yeah,
there. They
got
should
that.
have a lot of kids
And then
playing
Rhode
consoles.
Island, are they too good for video games in Rhode
Probably.
Island? I'm not sure. But yeah, so interestingly, but Pennsylvania, predominantly PlayStation.
That's
Ohio,
interesting.
predominantly Xbox. Who
You
else?
can see the great divide right
Yeah.
there. Whew.
And then California, where a lot of our friends are at as well, they are Xboxes. Everybody in the Midwest is a Switch.
10 states are a Switch. That surprises
That's
me.
really surprising
Yeah.
to me. I think because it's mobile and it's handheld.
It is pretty neat.
Yeah. So.
Yeah. All right, so let's get into, the long history of
Yeah,
video game consoles.
very long.
So did you know that Ralph H. Baer invented the first video game console? He's known as the father of video games.
But it really wasn't like when we think of like a video, like when we think of a video game console.
Right.
Even old video game consoles, this thing was archaic.
Yeah, it was like a big chunky box with big chunky controllers. And by controllers, it was like another box that
Yeah.
had like a dial or something
Yeah,
on it,
yeah.
right? And it was creatively named the brown box.
Do you know why it was called the brown box?
Because it was a brown box.
Because they used wood veneer tape to wrap around
to make
the
it look
box to
sleek.
make it look all sassy, and it was basically imitation wood veneer.
That's awesome. There were 6 games on this thing.
Ooh.
They were ping pong, tennis, handball, volleyball, a chase game, and a light gun game.
Do you know why they were all very similar?
Because because of Pong, right? Like the whole Pong setup, or
Well, no, it was just because it had to be the games had to be so similar one to another. Like whenever it went from tennis to ping pong,
it was basically they changed the net or
all
something.
they did was get rid of the net.
Yeah.
And because this didn't have cartridges at the time,
Right.
there were switches, and you would basically switch off the net, and then you would turn
It's so
on
crazy.
this, to show the net for ping pong versus the net for soccer. So it was super rudimentary.
Think
and
about
actually use switches.
That was still like a huge deal though back then. So this thing, the brown box, was really just a prototype though. And so in 1972, brown box led to the licensing of the technology by Magnavox, resulting in the first official home video game console, the Odyssey. Have you seen an Odyssey? Did you ever play one? I know that's before your time, but
I had a friend that had one,
did you?
and I was jealous. He also got an Atari first. He had a Commodore 64 first. He was
course, he was that
basically
guy.
loaded.
Oh,
You know who you are.
Does he
Jeff.
listen?
I doubt it.
Oh.
He's local, though.
Okay, well maybe
He's
we
a good
should-
guy,
We
though.
should go hunt him down. So that was interesting, but things start getting messy after that, right? So this in 1975 is kind of when the battle for consoles started, right?
Yeah,
Would you agree?
Can we back up a little bit?
Absolutely. We
So
can back up as
I want
far
to
as
talk
you
about the
want.
Odyssey just because just some interesting
Since it's
things.
really the first, right?
Yeah, so and even going back a little bit before that. So this cat, Ralphie.
Shoot your eye out.
He was actually working for another company at the time, got permission to kind of do this side gig developing this video game, and they gave him, I think they said they gave him, a couple $1,000s, like $2,500, and they gave him 2 engineers to help him design and make this video gaming console. And at the time, he was working for BAE Systems, which they're still around. They're a pretty big company organization.
You say so.
And the Odyssey console was released to the public in 1972, and it sold over 340,000 units. And at the time, it was, I don't have the number in front of me.
That many?
I think it was $142. So in
Wow.
today's money, it's about a $600 console.
I
So,
thought it was like a house. Wow.
If you do the math and
Yeah.
interpolate it out.
That's impressive.
Okay. I just want to do a little bit of history because that was the first, like you could
The
go
first.
buy it.
Yeah.
The Magnavox Odyssey.
Some would call it the first official home video game console.
I think you said that.
Oh, I did. Yes. Okay. In 1975, give or take. So the popularity of Atari's Pong arcade machine in 73 made Atari go, hey, you know what we might be able to do is make a whole bunch of monies making these home video game consoles. It might not be the first official one, but it's going to be pretty good. That's what they said. Did you know they said that?
Yeah, the Atari 2600, I believe.
Man, that was good. So yeah, the Odyssey kept coming out with different versions, like the 100, the 200, and it was kind of like just the same thing coming out in different colors or slightly different games or things like that. And like you said, it was set what was on there.
Yeah.
It didn't have cartridges, which was kind of a bummer. So then Atari came up with this new console with super highly acclaimed, right? Super popular, the 2600.
I had one.
They had the video pinball and the stunt cycle to compete with Magnavox. Did you had one of those?
I did.
How was it?
It was pretty good.
See, I think we had one, or what was the next one? The 52 or the 54?
I think it was a 5200.
5200. We had one or the other, but that was like I was too young to really remember doing that stuff. Did you like that? That was
I loved the Atari, the red and the joystick, and yeah, I liked Atari.
I'd say that it's pretty safe to say that Atari won
Oh,
at this point.
yeah.
They won this war with the Odyssey, even though they kept pumping those out. They had the 100, the 200, the 3, the 4, the
They
5,
tried.
the 2000, 3000, 4000. They also had some other competitors in there, like the Coleco Telstar, the Fairchild Channel F, the Wonder Wizard Model 7702. RCA got in the mix with the Studio 2.
We had a ColecoVision.
Did you?
I never heard of the Fairchild, and apparently that was a super popular one back then.
Yeah, I didn't
never
either.
heard of it.
Yeah. So my knowledge of all of this, I was like, there was the Atari, there was the Odyssey.
We had an Intellivision.
Oh, you had an Intellivision?
I had an Intel. It's the one that had the little coil handheld thing, and there's like buttons on it.
Did you really?
Yeah, we had an Atari 2600. We had a Nintellivision.
You're so
and
much
I
older
think
than
we
me.
may have had a ColecoVision. I think, but we never had. I never heard of Odyssey, and I never heard of the Fairchild Channel F.
Wow. Yeah, I
So-
didn't hear of that either, but it was apparently a big deal. So do you want to talk about the next generation? So like up to the 1980 with like, what was it, the Nintendovision?
Nintellivision.
Nintellivision?
So you want to talk
You
about if you want to talk about second or third generation?
Hey, you go with what
Okay,
you
so we're
want.
gonna do third generation, and this was like the big step for everything. So up until about 1983, this was an Intellivision, Atari 2600, 2800, yada yada yada. You got all those ones that are in there.
Intellivision.
Yeah, all that. And then 1983, something amazing happened. a company by the name of Nintendo Family Computers released the Nintendo Entertainment System, or the NES, to the world. And
See, that's where life started for me.
and this is referred to as the 8-bit era, and I think you're going to talk about bits a little bit later
I
on.
am.
But the crazy thing here was, so I had a Nintendo, and it was the most amazing thing ever. Like, I don't know how many times I can just picture it right now, blowing into the cartridges.
Oh my goodness.
To get the dust out.
It's like magic.
You know, and then you'd get mad whenever the Nintendo would break and the cartridge wouldn't stay pushed down, and we had cardboard we would jam in it to hold it down because the switch stayed. Oh, it was, I love, and the little button. The Nintendo was, like, to this day, it's by far one of my favorite gaming.
When we get into our lists of our favorite games, you're going to see that mine is strongly skewed towards the NES.
Mine is too.
And I tried to mix it a little bit to get some other things in there, but man, that's such a great system. And saving games, make sure you press the power and reset button at the same time, and then it would not work. Oh.
The crazy thing is about the third generation is the third generation goes almost all the way up until, like, I'm going to say the early 90s.
Yeah,
so
late
like
80s, early 90s.
Yeah, like
yep.
8-bit was like, and then what happened, it started accelerating after that.
It really did.
But 8-bit was the thing for like 10 years almost.
Yeah, a couple shout outs here. 1980, Pac-Man. 83, Super Mario Brothers. 86, Zelda. 87, Final Fantasy. 88, Golden Axe. So that was turning a huge arcade game into at-home kind of game. So Sega and Nintendo dominated the market at this time. So Sega showed up as well with the SG-1000 in 83. And so, again, NES really came out as the victor of this battle, right?
Big time.
I mean, Sega had a few good systems in there, but really Nintendo won out in this. It's important to note that the Atari 5200 was on the market around this time as well, because, you know, someone's going to yell at us for missing our systems that they loved so much, and they probably liked it more, blah, blah, blah. There are a bunch of other systems out there. Didn't work as well.
But nothing competed with...
Nothing.
I remember standing in line at Toys R Us...
Loved that.
Waiting to...
Remember Toys R Us having those flip things? Like, they didn't have the games, they just kind of had the sheets for the games.
They were,
you waited for stuff there?
Goodness gracious, yes.
So let's take a break before we go further back in time or down the timeline.
This might be like a 1-hour episode.
I know. We're going to take a break for a word from our sponsor.
I'm assuming it's Nintendo. Or Toys R Us. Oh, they're out of business.
They have pop-up stores now.
Oh, that's right.
Jeffrey's Toy Box. Anyways, we do have some shout-outs. Danny H., architect by day, maker by night.
Nice.
And from Sweden, so growing our Swedish community. So shout out there. Mark Z wrote back in. So Mark Z is back, and he's yelling at us.
Oh, Mark.
Specifically, he's yelling at me for yelling at everyone for the way they say Nolans. And how stupid that sounds when you're not actually in Nolans. But he says it's okay to say it anyway. He also wanted to let me know that you say it Plaquemines Parish and Endymion Crew.
You had this
because
spelled
apparently
phonetically, didn't you?
Yeah, he did it for me.
Okay.
So thank you, Mark, for writing in, and I'm glad you're still listening. He actually was involved with our Army Corps of Engineers episode.
Oh, cool.
So thanks for that. So if any of you have great ideas like Mark or want to correct
Send
us
them
for
in.
being dumb, email us at unprofessionalengineering@gmail.com.
The other thing, too, that I think we need to start doing, James, we give, and we give, and we give.
We give our time,
It's
our blood,
it's
sweat,
our
and
nature.
tears.
And we have a few listeners that have been kind. We got a couple king cakes. We did
delicious.
we did the Canadian snack challenge a while
that
back.
was so good.
That was amazing. I would love for our listeners, if they want to, we can get them addresses to send us stuff.
You're begging for stuff
I'm not
now?
begging, but like, so I was back looking at our videos over the past couple of months, and you and I wear like the same 7 or 8 t-shirts.
Yeah, we do.
I would love a t-shirt. I wear a women's medium.
There you go. Do you actually wear?
I'm kidding. I'm kidding. I wear a medium or a large in men's clothing, but I would love if you want us to
medium.
If you want us to represent
your show,
your company, and this is totally free, folks.
That's
we're not going
great.
to. If you want us to represent your university, your company,
you're smart. Luke.
anything you want, I'll wear a hat. I particularly like t-shirts because I love cool T-shirts.
Would you wear a grill if someone got you a
No,
tooth grill?
but yeah,
No?
so send us some stuff. We'll make sure we get you some stickers in return. I know T-shirts are way more expensive than stickers, but if you want some publicity, just send them. I would love to wear.
Good thinking.
Yeah, I think that'd be awesome.
Also, subscribe
Yeah.
and give us a review.
Reviews.
We're asking for a lot today.
Yeah, we are. Sorry.
All right, so let's move on back to the late 80s, early 90s, and this is when Sega and Nintendo continue to battle, but the Sega Genesis came out in 1988.
This is considered the fourth generation.
The fourth generation.
This is referred to as the 16-bit era,
It is.
which is double 8-bit.
Double.
Those good with the math.
Somehow the maths doesn't work that way. I
No.
don't understand.
But interesting, so the Sega came out, right? The Sega came
Sega
out.
Genesis, yep.
Sega Genesis
I had
came
it.
out. And
Loved
the
it.
thing that... so they still didn't win. So if
No,
you look at
still
market
lost.
domination, they still lost. But what we did get from the Sega Genesis that was amazing was Sonic the Hedgehog.
Yeah, Sonic.
I loved Sonic the Hedgehog.
Yeah,
I mean,
catch those rings.
it's not on my list of best ever.
It's not like
but
your Mount Rushmore.
that is a solid game from the 80s and 90s.
There was an Echo the Dolphin game that
I don't remember.
people liked. It was all, well, I'm not going to go into that. Anyways, 1990, the Super Nintendo came out.
Yep.
Again, I was more of a Super Nintendo guy than
I
a
never had
Sega
one.
guy. And my list, again, shows that clearly as well. So Atari actually made a 7800, which I did not know existed.
Ooh.
What's actually cool about this is that it offered backwards compatibility with the 2600, so you could go back and play all of your
That is a great
cool
idea.
things. Yeah, that's like way ahead of its
No
time.
one does that nowadays, do they?
Xbox allows you to. I don't know about PlayStation,
okay.
but it's newish. Like,
Yeah.
that's a great idea.
Who would think of backwards compatibility? Thinking about the customer.
Yeah, right? Very cool. The Neo Geo was out around that time. I have a whole story about that because it's an SNK product, and I remember the SNK Baseball Stars game for Nintendo that I loved. But they were a big arcade game company, and they
Yeah.
decided to get in the mix. Never really worked out. But I have some numbers here for sales by units, just to kind of show how crazy things started getting. The Neo Geo was a failure, and it sold 980,000 units. Let's see here. The Super NES, the SNES, sold 49,100,000 units.
Wow.
Isn't that crazy? And then along the same time was when we had like the handheld things. And I didn't really consider those either, like the Game Boy and the Game Gear. Game Boy sold 118 million units. Do you know how many that is, Luke? It's 118
That's 118
million.
million. That's a
That's a
lot
ton.
of units.
All right. So moving on, we're going to the next generation.
Yeah, so this is the fifth generation. So this is roughly from 1993 to 2000. So this was 32 and 64-bit era started. And again, I don't understand. I mean, you would think it would double and get twice as good and twice as fast, but I guess, like you said, the math doesn't work out that way.
Yeah.
And then what happened here was PlayStation kind of came into play.
Came on strong.
No pun intended.
Yeah.
And it was the most successful console of that entire generation. And the crazy thing was they started targeting a little bit from a marketing standpoint. So traditionally games were targeted at, so up until now, or up until like the early 90s, games were targeted at kids, right? Except for the bossy dads that would have to show you for 3 hours how to play it. It's like, Dad, I know how to play. Let me play. They were targeted at kids. So what they started, PlayStation, is they started doing, they were looking for people from 20 to 30. So the games...
The people who grew up with these other systems.
These games had more mature topics, more mature storylines. This is whenever you got into like Grand Theft Auto and all these kind of like shoot 'em up kind of games. First person shooter games started showing up, and they really took off. And it was the first home console to ship over 100 million units worldwide. Was the PlayStation.
Wow.
So that is the fifth generation.
There was a lot of big things that happened with this as well, and one of them was back with the Philips CDI, which came out in the early 90s.
remember.
And this is when they started changing from cartridges back to or over to compact discs.
Oh, okay,
Because
CDs.
they were able to handle more and have larger games, things like that.
Well, because you're doubling the bits, right? You need
All the
more
bits.
space, and the cartridges couldn't handle.
Yeah, and again, we'll get into that later on. But Atari also made its last console at this time. It was again a CD-based thing, the Atari Jaguar, Jag. How would you say it?
I'd say Jaguar.
Jaguar.
Jefferson,
If you're British, you say
Jefferson Jaguars.
Jaguar, right? I don't know.
Oh, they're wrong.
Paul can tell us. Anyways, that happened. Sony showed up, like you said, with the PlayStation. I bought one solely to play Final Fantasy VII. I bought the whole system just for one video game. I think I only ever bought 3 games for my PlayStation.
Okay.
How terrible is that? Nintendo continued on, though, with the cartridge, with the Nintendo 64.
Yep.
And I didn't have a Nintendo 64. That's kind of when I stopped, I guess, for a little while. It turns out that I found that there were girls in the world and beer. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to put this video game stuff on pause for a while.
I could see that.
Apparently, GoldenEye was real popular there. And so, moving on.
So next one up
Next
is
generation.
Next
Yep.
generation. This is the 6th generation. This is 128-bit era. So this is almost exclusively CDs. They started to move over to DVDs at this point. And this is also whenever Xbox really got on the scene. Microsoft got on the scene with Xbox. And wow, Xbox, they had all kinds of backing, obviously. Because I remember when the Xbox first came out, I was like, Microsoft, what are they doing?
Yeah,
Thinking they
why
can
are you
compete
doing
with
this?
PlayStation. Little did we know that they were going to do pretty well. But during this time frame, PlayStation was still, the market leader. Although Xbox did a really amazing job with the online services and the online
that was
gaming.
a big part of their success.
They were ahead of the curve with those options. And and the big one, the flagship for Xbox Live, was the game Halo 2, which was, at the time, it was the best-selling Xbox game with over 800 million copies sold worldwide.
Neat.
Bananas.
Couple things here. In that same stretch, Sega was still around, and they made the Sega Saturn, and they came out with the Dreamcast as well after the Saturn bombed. And the thing that's amazing about the Dreamcast is that it provided internet support with a built-in modem for online play. How novel. What a novel idea, right? And took off. Couple numbers here. This is when Nintendo really started to dive.
Yeah.
They had the GameCube, which I actually did have one. 21 million units sold. Xbox was still only at like 24, but they had just started, so it was already ahead of GameCube. PlayStation 2, 155. So just crushing the market. So before we move on any further, let's take a break for this week's Luke's Rant.
Okay, kids, don't play video games.
Was that the whole rant?
No, that's
Oh.
not. No. So I have to. I got to talk about my video game experience a little bit. So I played a ridiculous amount of video games whenever I was in high school and middle school, like obscene amount of video games. And then I haven't played a video game, again, like I said, since probably 2001 was the last time I played a video game. And I can honestly say, from all my nephews and nieces and cousins and like all these kids I see out in the world, there is a clear difference that I see in children that play video games to an obscene extent. Now, I'm not saying all video games are bad. I take that back. I'm joking, because there's tons of smart, great kids that play video games. I'm sure of that. But in general, if you let your kids play video games so much that it affects their social skills,
Oh, yeah.
like I see kids all the time, and I can tell that this kid plays a lot of video games because he has zero social skills. Or
things can factor
and
into
it
that.
might not just be video games. It might be the amount of time they spend on social media, blah 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 blah.
You sound like a really old man.
I know I do. So the crazy thing that's happening now is with like Fortnite. There's this convergence of video games and social media where you're like talking to people and commenting, and it's all online, and you can do it on your phone and do it on a console and do it on a computer. I think this confluence is the word I'm going to use of social media and video games. I think it's a bad thing. If you're going to play a video game, play a video game. If you're going to be on social, be on social. The minute you let both those things come together, it's just going to...
Only bad things can happen.
I think so, yeah.
All right. Thanks for that public service announcement. So I think we're going to just gloss over these last ones and just say well, we have our modern systems that
Yes.
today. So your Xbox Ones and your PS4s. The Nintendo U bombed, but the Nintendo Switch has come back strong, and it's really, I
Big
think,
time.
kind of saved Nintendo,
Oh,
honestly.
it definitely. I think I saw something where they said that was like their last ditch effort
Really,
was the Switch.
it seems great. I don't have one, but it seems like it's
Are
very
are
popular.
you a Wii fan?
I had a Wii. It was okay.
The thing I liked about the Wii, so all my
The
complaining I
motions
just
and
did,
exercise and
is
whatnot.
you're getting up, you're moving, you're not just sitting on your butt pressing buttons with your
Yeah,
thumbs.
I guess so. All right, so what about bits? 8-bit and 16-bit and all that jazz. A little bit of information on that because I always thought I knew what it meant and I was like, better graphics.
How many squares are there?
But yeah, so 8-bit and 16-bit for video games specifically refers to the processors used in the console. So the number references the size of the words of data used by each processor. The 8-bit generation, like Nintendo and the NES, used 8-bit processors. 16, like the SNES, used 16-bit processors. And this affects the quality and variety in graphics as well as the music by affecting how much data can be used at one time. So some of the consoles originally didn't even have sound because of these limitations, which is interesting. So the term 8-bit graphic literally means that every pixel uses 8 bits for storing the color value. So only 256 options are available for the palette. More specifically, so for the color palette, 16-bit, on the other hand, would give you 64,000 colors, and modern 24-bit palettes support 16 million colors.
So it gets way
So it
better.
just keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger. Fun facts for you: video game market in the U.S. in 2017 was going on $19 billion.
With a B.
Yes, and the most recognized gaming brand in the U.S. is Nintendo still, because like Xbox, Microsoft might be recognized as something else, and Sony and whatever else.
So what do you think about people that are professional gamers? Like people that get played.
I'm jealous.
Like this cat called Ninja. Like
Yeah,
my daughter.
Yeah, that streams
like
stuff.
so people watch this person
donate
play
money to
video
him.
games and give him money. So do you think that's like or you think this is just like I think it's poppycock
I
to
don't know what
use
that
one
means.
of Paul our friend Paul's words.
Okay.
It's poppycock. It's terrible. You get paid to play a video game?
That's just jealousy speaking.
You think
I would love
because he
to.
makes way more money than I do.
Oh, yeah.
Like ridiculous amount.
So they have like the esports too, and I'm told that after 29 or 30, your reflexes start to go downhill because you're getting
gotta make
older,
money
and
quick.
you're actually not as sought after because you're too old to compete, which
Wow.
really hurts my
Wow,
feelings.
I've got no reflexes then.
Yeah, we're the worst.
it-
And then they have all those buttons and
There's
clicking.
way too much stuff.
One more thing I wanted to talk about before we get into our big
Okay.
finale. How about that?
Shoot.
And that's the different storage options. And actually, why does the Nintendo Switch kind of use cartridges again? Because this was a big thing, going from nothing to cartridges to CDs and back. So it turns out it's all about a real density, is what it's called apparently, which is
Okay.
measured in bits per square inch. So cassettes and 5 1/4 inch floppies. Remember the big floppies? Like, at least in school for me, we'd use those on the apples.
Heck yeah.
They had games encoded on them by changing the magnetic polarization of the material in small patches, which is kind of crazy, but therefore they didn't have have a real high density. So this is why cartridges showed up with a circuit board and silicone chips, and that's where the games were encoded then. So that started to increase that density. So increasing the bits per square inch. So then the PS1 showed up, and they moved to CDs, and then DVDs, and then Blu-rays. And this is where the discs could have tiny grooves on them that could be read by a laser. And because of these tiny grooves and the diffraction, that meant that the areal density could be even greater. So the limiting factor here on these CDs and these Blu-rays is diffraction. And so how the waves spread out, and then the different wavelengths of light going out and then coming back.
Wow.
So CDs use red light as the laser, and then Blu-ray showed up, and of course they use blue.
They use the green.
But and so it has a much shorter wavelength. But unfortunately, that has the shortest wavelength, so it can't improve any further. Basically, is what they're telling
They
me.
can't get better with Blu-rays.
Right. So DVDs had the density of 2.2 gigabits per square inch. If you think about that, I mean, what were we saying? Well, it was really small before. Blu-rays have a 12.5. That's how much of an increase they got.
And now they're saying 12.5 is the max, so they got to come up with something
Because
else.
of the laser, that's the max. So you can't change this due to capacity and the wavelength limitations. And they used to be way better, right?
Yeah.
Way better than cartridges. That's why Nintendo got such flack for continuing to use cartridges. But here's the funny thing. Hard drives have caught back up, and they've surpassed discs now. They're at the 1.2 terabits per square inch. Fun fact, apparently there's something called DNA microchip with a 1.6 exobit per square inch.
I don't know what that means.
It's 1 million times better than a hard drive.
Wow.
There's also something called electronic quantum holography, so like holograms. Yeah, which is apparently a thing. I know that's the right look.
My head hurts right now.
They're getting 35 bits per electron. That's 3 exobits per square inch.
You may as well be speaking a different language right now, James.
So basically what I'm saying is the Nintendo Switch is going back to cartridges because now that technology has caught back up and surpassed that of a Blu-ray because microchips and all that technology is improving at such a rate.
Okay, so I want to finish with top games, some personal favorites. We can go a little bit long here because I feel like this is a good one. So we might have different lists, but
I think we have the same top games.
The top. I'm just going to do the top 3 games. So this is all time, top 10. So the top 10 all time
by IGN.
I think
who's
this
like
is
a
IGN.
Gaming thing. Yeah.
I think it's IGN. So I got Super Mario World.
That's the SNES version.
Yes, I got Legend of Zelda or
Ocarina
of Time, Portal. Never heard of it. Super Metroid. I played Metroid, not Super Metroid. Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past. Never heard of it. Super Mario Brothers 3. Never played it. Tetris. Yes. Half-Life 2. Never heard of it. Red Dead Redemption. That sounds stupid. And Super Mario 64. So of the top 10, I've played 2.
I've owned 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of them.
Wow.
I never played Ocarina of Time, which I'm told is the best Zelda ever. So that's a shame. Portal, too much brain for me.
Yeah.
Red Dead Redemption just had another game come out, so it must still be doing well.
So here's the current number 4. So top 4 games currently today, right now. So the number 1 game is League of Legends. Number 2
that's a good game.
is Counter-Strike Global Offensive, Fortnite, and Hearthstone Heroes of Warcraft. Hearthstone Heroes of Warcraft. So those are the current
there's a lot
games.
there's a lot of PC stuff going on there.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I'm not going to go through the designers because there's a whole bunch of stuff that they do. But what I want to finish with is my 4 favorite games, and hopefully you have yours.
I have my top 10 list.
I think we got a little similarity
Oh,
here.
really?
I didn't do top 10 because I never played that many games. By far, my number 1 was Super Mario Brothers 1983, the OG on the NS.
It's a game changer.
Game changer. My number 2, close second, Legend of Zelda 1986. I spent so many hours not doing homework playing that game. It was amazing. Really close third is Metroid. Oh, is that the best game ever?
Metroid.
Whenever you killed Mother Brain with the rockets, it was just the best game ever. So then I had this enormous gap. And then the last time, enormous.
Look at that.
I basically went 12 years, 14 years. So the next game that I played after Metroid was Delta Force Land Warrior. And it launched in 2000. I think I was playing it in 2000, 2001. So that's the last game I played was Delta Force Land Warrior in 2001.
So I did a top 10, and I was having trouble really deciding on my top 10. I got my first 8. So, in no particular order, because I love them all too much. Metroid's up there.
Is that your number 1?
I think it might be my 1 overall. It was the first video game I ever owned. My dad said, "You're not allowed to get a video game until you and your brother beat this one." Metroid's super hard.
Challenge accepted.
He eventually backed off on that
Yeah.
because it took forever. I was probably 20 by the time I beat it. The Legend of Zelda for NES, The Legend of Zelda Link to the Past for SNES. I also have Skyrim on there. That's Xbox 360, I think.
I don't even know that.
Super nerdy.
Okay.
It's beautiful. Smash Bros. Melee for the GameCube.
Never
I
heard of
spent
it.
too much of my life on. Super Mario Kart.
I've
first.
seen that one. I've never played
Love it. Great game, and that's the SNES version. Contra 1.
Contra was a good
Contra's
game.
a good one.
Not in my top, but it's a good game.
Final Fantasy 1 was
Yeah.
got me into all of my nerding adventures. Then these ones I struggled with. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, the arcade game.
That was a good game.
So it was the arcade, and then they ported it over to the NES.
It didn't port well.
I loved it though. And then I threw in Castlevania, and that's more of just the series because I loved it so much, and Super Mario World, so the
Okay.
SNES version.
Wow.
Gosh, I love video games.
We should have done a whole episode.
Why
on
don't
this.
I play more?
I couldn't imagine playing a video game right now.
I played Fortnite, the one you hate so much, I think about 5 times. I died immediately and couldn't understand anything that was going on. I gave up and just shut down my system.
Anytime there's anything more than an A and a B button,
Yeah,
I don't know what to do.
it's tough. All right, well, hopefully you enjoyed our travel through time, the history of video games, and learned a little bit about bits, bytes, Blu-rays, DVDs,
Yep.
wavelengths, and holograms. So, until next time.
See ya.